Okay, guys, let's start banner number 3 here. So, first up, we have Jeunesse Crane, aka Miss Crane Summer version. Now, this one's interesting because she's coming to us as an AoE arts alter ego. And frankly, I'm kind of surprised. I did not expect to see Miss Crane as a summer unit necessarily. I do believe I had her on my predictions, but this was one of those deals where I thought this was like a sneaky dark horse thing and not something that they necessarily would actually pull the trigger on, but they did. And I can definitely say she's deserving at this point. I think Crane is a very underutilized character, and when she does show up, people really like her. Now, to me, this is very interesting from the simple standpoint as well that our fantastic illustrator, Mr. Shaka P, who has done some fantastic craft essences, gets to finally draw this servant again. So getting her as a summer form, definitely nice. But how is Miss Crane going to function for you? Is she going to be a unit that you guys need? And how does she stand up against some of her competitors? We're going to go over all of that here in a second, but let's go ahead and let's start out with her raw stats. Then we'll get into the skills and the NP, and then we'll start looking at things like noble phantasm generation, damage numbers, you name it. So right off the rip here, you guys can see she actually has about 9.8k attack. This is really good for a 4-star, so definitely knocking on the door to 10k, and definitely a good thing because it means that even when you don't have your actual like steroids and stuff on with her, you will at least get a good chunk of damage out of her carding. HP though is a little bit more on the anemic side. That is going to be a little bit of a concern for her. It's only about 10k, so you got to watch out. Make sure you are taking adequate protection, but as an arts unit, should be pretty easy to do. Star absorption is actually a little bit higher than average. Star generation is pretty much right on target. She has earth attribute. She has 0.37 NP charge attack rate, which is not too great, but you'll see why that is the case with her deck and her hit counts. She has 4% NP charge defense, 45% death rate, which is higher than average, much higher. So be very careful using her around death proccing units. She is a neutral good alignment. She is female gendered, has the animal characteristics trait, hominidae servant, humanoid, normal servant, summer mode servant, as well as weak to Inima Elish, rounding out her traits there. So not a whole lot to exploit, but things that are at least pretty standard nowadays on a lot of units. Looking at her deck, you guys can actually see she has a triple arts deck. It's kind of rare for us to get these nowadays. And frankly, it's kind of welcome to see because in a lot of arts compositions, one of the things that you may encounter, especially down the stretch, if you're in just a normal farming environment, you'll notice that you just have such an easy time of actually getting, like back to an NP. But what happens if the fight breaks down or you end up having to go the distance longer than 3 turns? That's where having triple arts can really just boost you because you're going to have a whole lot of opportunities for triple arts chains. And those can help you get back to the NP faster than you otherwise would. And it can also help other units contributing to the chain get back to their NP. And that'll actually be a big point that we will make on Tiamat here in the next video, but it's something to pay attention to for this one in particular, as she is an arts unit. As far as hit counts, all of them are above average, with the exception being the Buster and the extra attack, which has, I think, been the case on almost every single summer unit so far, which is kind of wild. But I think 3 arts cards at 4 hits, that's one of the reasons why you have a 0.37 NP gain rate. So let's look at her actual skills. And you guys can see here, she is a very party-centric unit. She has party-wide arts up for 3 turns of up to 20%, party-wide debuff immunity 1 time 3 turns, party-wide evasion 1 attack 3 turns, and increase the party's critical attack chance resistance for 3 turns, making it harder to crit the party. All of that on a 6-turn cooldown. Then we get to the second skill. This charges the party's NP gauge by 20%. It's also going to increase the party's NP damage for 3 turns by 20%. So we do have a lot of party centricity here. It's also going to increase the party's mental debuff success rate for 3 turns. And I want you to hold on to that because it's actually a very important part of her kit. And from there, it will increase the party's damage against enemies with a mental debuff status for 3 turns. So she actually has a 30%, up to 30% power mod against anybody that has a mental debuff. You guys can see them depicted there. And so there are a lot of opportunities for her to just kind of get more damage out of it. Should be noted, though, that stun is not in and of itself considered a mental debuff. This is actually basically the terror debuffs and things like that. So please understand it's not the same thing necessarily as like skill seal or stun. But yes, it is a really, really nice power mod to have, and it's one that you guys can easily exploit. It's not just going to affect her NP, it's also going to affect her attacks. And given the fact that it is a 3-turn buff, it's definitely going to be a good one. Now, all of that's on a 6-turn cooldown, but let's go to the 3rd skill. And you can see she has a 60% chance on this skill to charm all enemies. Guess what charm is? Charm is a mental debuff. So that will trigger the actual power mod from her 2nd skill. Better yet, the 60% chance can be made 100% by the mental debuff success rate that we just talked about on the 2nd skill. So she has the capacity within her own kit to easily sort of succeed and make it so that things are just kind of guaranteeable, assuming an enemy doesn't have debuff resistance built in or things like, again, debuff immunity. From here, she will also increase her own NP damage by up to 30% for 3 turns and charge herself 30% gauge. So this is where, kind of out of her entire kit, this is the only thing that's actually selfish. So in a weird way, this is going to make Crane good not only at like being the sole focus as a looper, but also in working with multiple other DPSs or supports and getting them to be protected, getting their charge up, getting their steroids up. That's going to make her a pretty flexible and adaptable unit. So she's definitely going to be very, very nice for this. From here, looking at her passive skills, she gets item construction clothes. So she gets a unique version of this, which increases the party's buff success rate by 6.5% while she's on the field. Presence acclimatization, which is another unique form of presence concealment. So instead of just getting the critical star generation rate of 20% here, we also get the reduction to her own critical attack chance resistance. So this means in countering the effect on her 1st skill, she actually is more susceptible to getting crit by enemies. But as long as you have that 1st skill up, that'll easily outdo this. But that is a demerit that she will have. So just understand that that's there. For her next passage, she gets a unique one called Summer Fields Forever. And it's while she is on the field, she will recover the HP of Midsummer Glow allies by 500 for every turn. And you can see what are Midsummer Glow allies. They are child servants or servants with the summer alignment or the summer mode servant trait. So this is really, really interesting, as this definitely has a wide range of things, but it's not a terribly strong heal. It's just something that's kind of there passively, which maybe with combined with other healing effects could amount to a whole lot, but otherwise it's just a nice little thing there. From there, though, it will grant Midsummer Glow allies 3 critical stars as a regeneration buff per turn. So that's just going to be a nice thing. It'd be an easy way to increase stars per turn in a similar way to how Miss Crane's original form kind of has that. And it will increase the NP generation rate of Midsummer Glow allies by 10%. So now anybody getting used in conjunction with her that is either a child servant or a summer servant, herself included, will basically have the again additional 10% NP gains. So that's actually going to help out her refund numbers. Taking a look at her append skills, to me, mana loading makes a whole lot of sense when we're talking arts loopers. Just getting that starting charge really going to be nice in certain scenarios, might help you start out with a better CE. But there are things like skill reloading and getting back to stuff faster that may be useful, or again, the critical damage append or the extra attack performance append. Interestingly enough, her 3rd append is actually somewhat synergistic. As an alter ego, she's already effective against the cavalry triangle, at least semi-effective. So having the extra 30% against caster specifically can be a benefit to you. So the question is, again, is this something that you have the coins for? But it could be very good, and it's worth mentioning for you guys, depending on how much you see yourself using Crane and in what scenarios you see yourself using her. Looking at her Noble Phantasm, it is a 4-hit Arts AoE NP, as we mentioned before, and it's going to remove all enemies' offensive buffs first. So that means no invuln pierce, no NP damage up, you know, various steroids and things like that. They're all going to be gone before she uses this. It could be really good for stopping an enemy from maybe like piercing your offensive, or sorry, your defensive capabilities. From there, it will inflict confusion status for 3 turns to all enemies. And this is significant because it has a 30% chance to activate the debuff below for every turn, which is a skill seal for 1 turn. Here's the thing. The confusion status itself counts as a mental debuff. So this will, before her NP damage goes out every time, trigger her power mod. And that's a good thing to note because this will happen as you move through every wave. As long as the enemy doesn't resist it or isn't debuff immune, you will sit here and you will just be racking up power mod on everybody that you're hitting. So Crane's power mod numbers are actually her true baseline for most scenarios. And that's something to consider when we evaluate her numbers. From there, she will deal damage to all enemies, and then she will inflict critical damage resistance down debuff by 20% for 3 turns to all enemies, unless they are a Midsummer Glow unit. So again, a child servant or summer servants, basically. That's a little bit of an interesting thing to denote, is that she just does not want to deal extra damage to them, but it is what it is. Looking at her overcharge effect, this one's actually also kind of surprising, as it's, 1, not too hard to get overcharge in an Earth comp, and 2, this is an overcharge that actually stacks over 3 turns. It's going to activate before damage. It's going to give you arts up of a base of 10%, but even with 1 overcharge, it gets 15. With 2, it gets all the way up to 20. So you can see, getting this rolling and getting this stacking, you're actually going to get quite a bit of capability out of Crane's NP. Again, it's maybe one of those ones where people maybe looked at it and they weren't quite sure how the debuffs actually work, but it is a very synergistic thing and very nice for her. So how does Crane's refund work then? Well, let's take a look. So on screen, you guys can now see this is going to be Miss Crane's refund numbers against first all classes, so like just normal neutral classes, then berserkers, which are the worst, then casters, which are the best to refund against. And you guys can see just the kind of wild gambit against neutral classes. She's averaging that 50% with 0 overkill hits. Again, this is 3 enemy waves, so it is what it is. But against something like berserkers, where she's not necessarily as effective for generating Noble Phantasm, she can still get up to like 40% base there, and at about 5 out of 12 overkill hits, which would be possible, you can manage to get 50%. So definitely not the easiest thing in the world, but for early waves, that would certainly be possible. And against casters, you guys can see, again, even at 0 out of 12 hits, she's already at 62%. So this is pretty much a no-brainer. You can't quite get her to a full 100% loop, but she's got charge baked into her kit, and most arts supports have some form of charge support with them. So I do think this is a pretty easy one, and this is just with double Castoria setups there for refund. So what does that mean? It means for all intents and purposes, your Miss Crane is going to be a Black Grail looper. So consider then the following, that when it comes to her capabilities, you can start her from 0 in most scenarios. If you want to make that a little bit easier, things like the mana loading can help. Any CE that is going to help you pump damage is going to be perfect for Crane. There may also be CEs that you might want to target, things like, like Honey Lake or anything else that can give invuln pierce to her might actually be really nice. So it really just depends, but basically that's what I would go with, is just maximum damage output, unless you're facing odd structured nodes and you maybe think that you're going to need some starting charge. That's where something like Ocean Flyer can come in, or heck, maybe even a K-scope if you're just really worried about the number of enemies, but you know you have the damage. So let's take a look at the actual charge compositions for you. You guys can see we have 4 setups here, and this is her kind of just as a solo unit working her way through the node. Basically, the first one here is a 2-2x neutral wave. She's still going to manage to work in this environment. Basically, 0% starting charge on the CE, just an unlocked mana loading append. We don't even need it like actually maxed out. And we're going to start off with all of Crane's charge. It's going to bring her up to 60%. Use the double Castoria, 20% charges there to get her the maximum MP gain. And then that's a really, really good way to start out. She'll refund about 40% there in wave 2. But then you can easily get her back to 100% with both Castorias. She'll refund 40% again in wave 3. And then Oberon fills in the remaining 70%. If we're looking at a 3-3x neutral, we don't even need the mana loading append, and we don't even need Oberon. We can maybe use someone like Waver now, who can get you the extra overcharge. There are some beneficial aspects to that. And you guys can see refund is going to be looking at about 48% on wave 2, 61% going into wave 3. From there, we also have another setup where this is just going to be dual support with no required third support here, and instead we use a mystic code like Fragment of 2004. So you can see that's going to rely on the NP gain from that. You'll want to pop that on turn 1 basically there, and that's also going to use a 50% C. But this works in an environment where you maybe just go like, hey, maybe I'm already having to use 50% C due to an event or something like that. And now I could just kind of go through and just use double support and not have to try too hard. Similarly, if we can get at least 4 out of 12 overkill hits in wave 2, we can also make just a setup of like Castoria, Nero Bride, and Shufu work. And again, that can be another scenario that allow you to work your way through this, though that will require the mana loading to kind of be maxed out for something like this. But again, you guys can see Miss Crane is a pretty versatile unit just in terms of like her being the focus. So now imagine working her into multiple damage dealer comps. Imagine her allowing supports to get to their NP and things like that. And I think you'll notice that this is a very, very valuable unit all around. Take a look at Crane's damage numbers now. Like, how is she going to stack up on her own? How is she going to, be able to compete with some of her competitors? This is where things are going to get a little interesting. You guys can see, again, this is just raw numbers only. No buffs from an additional support or a craft essence or a mystic code. Just neutral numbers under her own power and her own skills. You guys can see damage is okay. There's nothing particularly stellar about it. With the mental debuff, again, as we mentioned before, probably being a constant, it definitely shores up the numbers quite a bit. Looking at her in an actual comp now, you guys can see this is 2 times Castoria, Oberon, a level 100 Black Grail. This would be how you'd get kind of the most out of her there. But you guys can see wave 1 damage, not too great, particularly without the mental debuff. But if we are including the mental debuff, the numbers get significantly better. But you can see pretty much by wave 3 you're looking at about 250 to 270k there. Definitely not bad for NP1, and the numbers are only going to get higher as we start looking at NP2 and then even NP5. And the reason that we've put this all here is for comparative sake. So how does she stack up against the obvious comparable welfare, which is Tai Sui? He is another AoE arts alter ego. He also works from a Black Grail standpoint. And you can see Tai Sui at NP5 actually does some pretty stellar damage, particularly with his super effective damage against the man attribute. So to me, Tai Sui in the man attribute niche, pretty much unstoppable. Crane will not be able to beat him. But at NP5 on wave 3, Crane can basically beat him with just NP2 of herself. So without his niche in play, Crane kind of is the better unit, particularly even if we're not comparing things like the mental status. So there is a whole lot to go off of there, but Tai Sui is definitely free, and there's something to be said about that. But if you're already going to be rolling the banner for Tiamat, yeah, she actually does stack up pretty favorably unless Tai Sui is in his niche. Rasputin's another interesting one. To me, Rasputin is a little bit more of a challenge unit. Not necessarily, your go-to farm or anything like that. But If we did want a 3-turn with him, if we did want to farm with him, you guys could see the comparable numbers here. He's only going to come out to about 254k there at NP1, but he does have that evil niche that really helps power him. So in that regard, you're looking at, again, him being significantly stronger than Crane, assuming that his niche is in play. And from there, you're going to be looking at probably NP3, NP4 of Crane to actually beat Rasputin in his niche. But it is what it is, and that is a 5-star, so you kind of understand. What is interesting, though, is that if you get more NP levels of Crane, Crane can just absolutely beat an NP1 Rasputin, and you would be looking at requiring like NP2 for it to be a similar comparison to something like Tai Sui. That being said, the elephant in the room as we're talking about alter egos is always just going to be Tiamat. And in that regard, if we compare Tiamat's compositions, let's just look at the minimal sort of like we're going to use the best composition for Tiamat, but the minimal output she could put at that, which is going to be NP1. You're going to be looking at about 487k by wave 3. There is no composition, basically, of Miss Crane, even with her mental debuff, even at NP5. The maximum amount Crane's going to be able to amp is about 449k. So NP1 Tiamat just wins. And this is just another example of kind of the thing I've been talking about for a while, which is that we have some really super like units in each of the classes at this point. Some of them stand just really high up above the others, and it's definitely a balancing nightmare for the devs. You guys can see it's not that Crane's a bad unit, but if you have someone like Tiamat, you're not going to need Crane in terms of damage. Tiamat will just win. So at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to what does Crane do in her kit that really makes her valuable to you? To me, I like the fact that she's a flexible unit. I like the fact that she has, again, this sort of party centricity with all of her kit. But damage is still very good, especially with the mental debuff constantly being in play for her. But is it going to be something that you're actually going to need in terms of that? So how do you guys feel about Miss Crane? Do you guys think she's actually worth it? And which ascension do you feel like is the best for her? Personally, I'm pretty partial to the 3rd ascension, but it definitely depends. I wish we had gotten the final ascension. It is what it is. But again, I will see you guys for the Tiamat video. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. Hey, if you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, right?